Calvin Buari was living large. He was a crack kingpin in the early 90s in New York. Mink coats, BMWs, money flowing in.
But then one of his proteges accused him of a double murder and he faced a life in prison.
After decades behind bars, a legendary defense attorney agreed to help.
But then it all comes crashing down.
We're previewing Empire on Blood.
That's on this episode of So Much Crime.
So Little Time. Before we get to the episode, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/SoMuchCrime, So Little Time. We put out our recaps early, so if you want to get ahead and listen to those recaps before they come out, you can get those on Patreon. Also, there's bonus content, longer time machines, stuff that gets cut from this show, but is definitely worth checking out. And you get the great feeling of supporting this show. So Patreon.com/SoMuchCrime, So Little Time. Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee, and today we're going to discuss Empire on Blood from Orbit Media.
After that, we'll do a true crime question of the week.
Don't know what Empire on Blood is? No problem. Neither did I.
If you're new to our show, this is one of our preview episodes. And these, all we do is introduce you to a new podcast. There's no spoilers. We're only going to talk about things from episode 1.
What's so exciting about this episode, it was recommended to us by one of our Patreon subscribers. Shout out to Jessica. We'll also link Empire on Blood in our show notes.
Next time in our full recap, we're going to discuss the whole series. But right now, we just want to decide if this is a crime that's worth your time.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, Dee, this crime that we're talking about, the center of Empire on Blood, happened on September 10th, 1992. So before we get to the story, let's hop in the time machine. I've got some songs, I've got some movies. What about you? What have you got today?
There was some absolute bops going on the charts in 1992. So I have one that I'm going to bring you. It was on the charts. It was top of the charts for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks straight. And so 10th of September, it's been on for 5 weeks at this point.
Okay.
It's still remains an absolute tune. I hope you know about it. I don't know. I don't know how much of the music that got to Ireland made it over to you. Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Wait, is this a remake of an old song?
Like, I never checked this out. I don't think so.
Okay. We've developed a bit of a pattern here.
Yeah, but I don't know. Whenever I hear a song, I just assume that that's just a song.
All right, let's find out.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. It's a soul's companion. You can feel it everywhere. Lift your hands and voices. Free your mind and join us. You can feel it in the air. Oh, it's a passion. Oh, you can feel it in the air. Oh, it's a passion. Oh, 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 oh.
I do not know what this is.
Rhythm is a dancer. It's a source of passion.
Wow. Yeah.
You know that one,
yeah, I
don't
do
you?
now, but without the tune.
Everywhere. Lift your hands and voices free. It's such a tune. Like, even now, if that comes on, great one.
All right. This one is a British band, so a little closer to Ireland. Maybe you'll get it. When you were here before, couldn't look you in the eye. You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. You float like a feather in a beautiful world. I wish I was special. You're so fucking special.
So fucking special.
There you go. Do you know who it is?
Yes. It's I'm a freak.
Creep.
I'm a
Creep.
weird creep.
Yeah, weirdo. Yeah, that's Creep is the song. Who's the band?
Like Radiohead or
Radiohead. Yeah, that's Radiohead's first hit song.
Yeah, it's a good song.
I can't believe you didn't do this other one. I do have a third one that I just thought for sure you would do because it came out this month.
Came out this month.
Uh-huh. All right, I'm going to try this one. This one you should get. My life is changing every day. In every possible way.
Possible way.
Yeah, the Cranberries.
All my dreams never quite as it seems. Let me see. When was that in the hits in Ireland?
Did it not come out in 1992 in Ireland?
No. Well, it wasn't a hit.
I mean, it's one of their big songs.
No, I know. It was released in September 1992.
I know. That's why I thought you would do this one.
Yeah. I always just look up the top ones.
Oh, well, yeah. I did that, and it was like the
Oh my
Billboard.
God, it only went to 9 in Ireland.
Not that end of the Cranberries in Ireland.
Lies. Anyway, okay. I have a movie I presume you've never seen, but I feel like you need to put it down on your list. I think you and your wife would love it.
Okay.
It's called Into the West. Have you heard of it?
No,
It's a Jim Sheridan movie. Have you heard it? You know Jim Sheridan, don't you?
I don't know. What else has he done?
He's a film director. My Left Foot.
Oh, yeah.
Field, In the Name of the Father.
Yeah.
In America. Yeah.
Yeah, I know all those.
He wrote it, and this one was actually directed by Mike Newell. Gabriel Byrne is in it.
Oh, I love Gabriel Byrne. Oh my gosh, she's the best.
And Alan Barkin.
Sure, she's great.
You should watch this.
What's it called?
Basically Into the West. It's about these two young boys, Tito and Ozzy, whose father was king of the Irish Travellers until his wife Mary died during Ozzy's birth. It's just so lovely. Like, it's so lovely, and it's really sad, but it's definitely worth a watch.
All right, I'll check
It's
it out.
beautiful. Yeah, that came out in 92.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
I have a couple movies for you. I don't
Go for it.
think you're going to know these, so I was just going to tell you about them because I was 13 in September 1992, so this was a big time for movies for me. And in America, the big movies this year were Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman. Great. Kind of Clint Eastwood's final, Richard Harris is in it, his final Western. Sister Act came out that year.
I love Sister Act.
Yeah, 1992.
What do you mean I wouldn't know these movies?
Well, okay, the two I want to talk about, I don't think you know about. I'm saying the ones I think you would know about.
Oh, okay.
League of Their Own came out that year.
Okay.
Great movie. Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis. So the crime happened on September 10th, 1992. On September 11th, 1992, one of my all-time favorite movies came out. That is not a well-known movie, but let me tell you who's in this movie. Robert Redford.
Go on. Mm.
Dan Aykroyd.
Mm-hmm.
Sir Ben Kingsley.
Okay.
Mary McDonnell. Sidney Poitier. River Phoenix. James Earl Jones.
Jesus.
I know. The tagline is a burglar, a spy, a fugitive, a delinquent, a hacker, and a piano teacher. And these are the good guys. I'm presuming you've never...
No, I don't know the tagline, so I'm not sure.
It's a movie called Sneakers. And it is also one of the great San Francisco movies shot in and around the Bay Area. It has a lot of Bay Area sites and specific things here. It is also one of those movies that came out in the early days of the internet, and it's about the internet.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so parts of it haven't aged great, but it has a really cool premise where the premise is Robert Redford leads this kind of ragtag group of like the burglar, the spy, the fugitive, the hacker, who companies hire them. I think banks specifically hire them to break in to their systems in order to figure out how vulnerable they are to hacks, to break it. Like, that's their job. And then Ben Kingsley kind of comes in as this. He was an old friend of Robert Redford's in college. Robert Redford had actually, related to this story we're talking about, Empire and Blood, basically the two of them were doing illegal stuff when they were college students. And when the cops came, Robert Redford quietly walked away, and Ben Kingsley took all the heat for it, went to prison for a long time. But then he comes out, and he's seeking his revenge.
Oh.
Yeah. So, great movie.
Okay. I never watch movies, but I'm writing them down as recommendations.
So before we jump into our discussion, let's just talk a little bit about what this podcast is about. So Empire and Blood originally came out in 2018, But then the creator, Steve Fishman, who is also our host, re-released it. So he updated it and re-released it in the summer and fall of 2024. So Steve Fishman is, again, he's our host. He is an investigative journalist with a really kind of amazing and crazy career. And I've got a couple of fun facts about him. When he was, I think, 19, he was a young journalist at a local paper in Connecticut, and he was hitchhiking. And the man who picked him up turned out to be a serial killer. And he was a serial killer by the name of Robert Frederick Carr III, who had murdered so he raped and strangled two 11-year-old boys and a 16-year-old girl who had hitched a ride with him.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so Fishman was only in the car with him about 15 minutes and he was unharmed. But he said this happened in the 70s and it's just haunted him for decades. He actually ended up making a podcast about that called My Friend the Serial Killer, which you can check out. There's a bunch of crazy things if you look into Steve Fishman, just bizarre things that have happened to him. One other thing that I wanted to mention, so that happened in the 1970s. In the 1980s, when he was in his 20s, he was in Nicaragua. And he had this genetic malformation in his brain that was giving him trouble, and he ended up going back to New York, and his mother put him in the care of a bunch of neurosurgeons. They scanned his brain, and they had to do brain surgery. He basically was hemorrhaging from a blood vessel. So he obviously survived that, but then he developed epilepsy. And so he wrote a book about this called A Bomb in the Brain, A Heroic Tale of Science, Surgery, and Survival. So it's mostly about the types of conditions that require brain surgery, how surgeons do brain surgery, and...
That's wild.
Yeah. So a little bit about our host, Steve Fishman. Okay, anyway, but about the podcast. So there are 8 episodes. I think the original version had 7. So this one has 8. Plus there's some bonus content that that's come out recently in this new version. The episodes, if you cut the ads, they're about 35 to 50 minutes each.
Yeah, it's a lot of ads. And what is the story? So we meet Cal, who in the early 90s rose up as like one of the crack kingpins in the Bronx. So we hear of Cal, and then we also hear of these 2 brothers, Elijah and Salahadin Harris. Okay, who were brothers who were not seemingly involved in the drug trade, but were murdered in 1992 while they sat in their car. We hear a lot about the crack epidemic at the time, super predators, and Rudy Giuliani, which, yeah. Sure. In 1995, Cal was convicted and sentenced to life for the double homicide of Elijah and Salahadin Harris. He has always claimed that he was not a murderer. He said he dealt drugs, but he never murdered anyone. And then we also hear about Myron Baldock. He was a hero lawyer who jumps onto the case in 2015. And he really believes that Cal is innocent and he is willing to fight for him. But then he dies.
He had a tumor behind his eye. And I think he went in, last we hear of him, he was going in for surgery.
Singing a song on his way in to get surgery.
Oh my gosh. We should talk about that. We'll come back to that.
And then he dies, which... Yeah.
And to be clear, this is just episode 1. All of the things you said.
Yeah.
That's just episode 1.
It's really hard to give like the synopsis. Like overview, we're looking at a guy who used to deal drugs and who was like in charge of certain corners being charged for something he claims he absolutely didn't do. And then other stuff.
Yeah. A bunch of other stuff. Rudy Giuliani. Hillary Clinton makes an appearance.
Yeah. It took a few pivots. So, Jeff, let's jump into it. What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like we sometimes start with the host, and I feel like the host is very present in this story. And I'll admit, at first I was a little put off by how present he was and his tone. And I don't know, there's a lot of personality there. Like, I feel like there was a little bit of posturing. He talked about how He had got an interview with Son of Sam. He was the first person to get an interview with Son of Sam in prison. He also got an interview with Bernie Madoff. So kind of like name dropping. But then as it kept going, I don't know, I kind of got swept up in the story.
To me, it felt like I was watching a movie or a TV show, but with my eyes closed. I felt like it was like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, is there a Godfather movie where there's like this narration over it? I don't know if it's a Godfather one.
Goodfellas. Goodfellas does that, I think. They might be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this whole like real in-depth narration going through, I don't know. It felt.
That's a good parallel. I didn't think of it as a movie. Goodfellas is it's a good metaphor for this. I did note that there's a lot of like strong scene setting. You really get a sense of these places.
Yeah.
And he does I think an amazing job. Like so the opening is Cal it's 2017. So he's been in prison for 22 years or something at this point. And he's at a court date appealing his life sentence. And you get all these little quick bits that just paint the picture of the courtroom. And I don't know, it's very impressively done. It's well written.
Yeah. I think that first, I think it's really well written. I don't know if I feel like if the format is strong.
What do you mean by that?
Or not the format, sorry, the structure. Like, I feel like episode 1, it was too much.
It was a lot.
Genuinely, it was a lot. And it just felt that, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of pieces, but they're not connecting. And obviously a first episode, it's like laying the foundation. There's people you're introduced to and you don't know like what's going to come of them or whatever. But this felt a little bit like messy. And maybe it's mirroring the messiness of the time that it's talking about, because by the sounds of it, it was real messy with all the crime stats and stuff that we're getting. But I don't know. I don't know how much I'm going to take with me from episode 1 and be able to remember as I like jump into future episodes.
It's dense with story and it's not told in a linear way. We jump around a little bit, which makes it more challenging. I actually found when I listened to it for the second time and I was taking notes, which I know is not a normal listen to a podcast activity. Listen to it a second time and take notes as you go. But in this case, and this has happened with other ones we've listened to, it really helped me sort of make sense of all the sort of disparate people, times. Like even the first time I listened to it, I thought, okay, so wait, there's this reference. So the crime happened September 10th, 1992. And then we hear about Cal, how he loves Snoop Dogg, and I talk about Snoop Dogg's album that came out in 1993, and I thought, well, wait, but if the crime happened in 1992, but of course the crime happens in 1992, but he doesn't get convicted until 1995. So like there's little like things that were jumps around in time that lost me, but made sense when I listened to it again, which is maybe a lot to ask.
Yeah. And look, I don't know. I feel like it's very strong. I feel like you can hear Steve Fishman's passion, but you can also hear, do you know what, it's like the person who knows something so well, has so much context, has done so much research on it, but it felt like we were getting a lot of it, but we don't have the context he has. So it's like when someone tries to teach you something, but they know something so well that it's hard for them to like break it down. And I don't think are you going to disagree with me?
I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay, go first.
Yeah, actually, I would almost disagree with what I said a few minutes ago, but also what you said.
Okay.
Because hearing you say that helped me also think about how one of the things I liked about it, and this is something I actually wrote down as a note after I finished listening to the first time, was we get a lot of heart. And we get a lot. There's a lot. I feel like I walked away with this with a good sense of the host, Steve, of Cal and Steve's relationship. And then also, I mean, Myron Beldock doesn't come in until the last, 10 minutes or so.
Oh, I know. But it's such an impact.
Such an impact. So, and you didn't mention this in the intro, but so Myron Beldock, who I'd never heard of, but apparently was a legendary lawyer. He had taken on a lot of challenging cases, including one of the Central Park Five, also Hurricane Carter, which is just a rough story. And then he also apparently was instrumental in getting the death penalty in New York overturned and banned.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes on cases like this.
And he took this one on pro bono, just
yeah,
to...
pro bono, and with pretty, like, he was like 85 and very sick.
Yeah.
And then I feel like even though he's only in this for 10 minutes or so, we get such a sense of who he was. I mean, we hear him sing this song about his eye surgery. It's...
Oh, here, I'm not saying that I didn't like this first episode. I'm just saying, to me, it just felt a little bit, a bit hard to, I don't know,
grasp everything, to make sense of it all.
Yeah. And I do get, like, it's episode 1. That's the case. And maybe this is going to all make sense as we go into the other episodes. Very, very hard not to press play on episode 2. And I don't know whether it's the times as well, the times we're living in right now. But I don't know, some of it was just like the Rudy Giuliani thing and how he's been described.
Yeah, how much do you know of Rudy Giuliani's past?
Like, oh, very little. I don't know. I feel like he's not great. Like, he was really hard on crime. But I think he did a lot of good for New York. I think this is all I know of. But, like, I haven't done no research on him. So all I can see is, like, him with his hair leaking on his face.
So he's become a bit of a buffoon in his old age. But at this time, he had been a prosecutor. He got elected mayor of New York City when New York City was really at the worst of crime and just an epidemic of crime and violence and drugs. And so initially, I think he got a lot of credit for cleaning it up. And so, for example, he oversaw the Disneyfication of Times Square. So that's like, and then September 11th happened, and he was this, like, America's mayor for a brief window. So he had this sort of 10-year run of being, by some, thought of as this great transformational figure. That being said, the way he did it, the way he did all of these things, the way he cleaned up the city was, in hindsight, incredibly racist. He implemented incredibly discriminatory police practices, basically targeting people of color. And in hindsight, he was always doing terrible things all along. He just got more sort of outlandish and crazier as time went on. But yeah, I mean, he did change New York. I think he was very much responsible for changing New York.
And that, I suppose, like, you know, you say, like, he was responsible for changing New York, but it turns out, like, the way he did it was, like, not okay. And to me, it kind of mirrors a little bit about this case here. We're hearing about this drug dealer who, by all accounts, still, like, looks back on his time and with fondness and thinking about the cars he had and how easy it was and how fun it was and blah, blah, blah. But you're dealing drugs, like,
well,
and you say you weren't. Well, you say you weren't killing anyone, but, like, really, I would hazard a guess the families are going to beg to differ there.
And he did say he has regrets about the damage he did to his community by being involved in the crack trade. I presume we're going to get more of that, because he does, to me, and this was more implicit than explicit, but I feel like there was some atonement happening there. And I'm curious to hear if that becomes part of the story as we go on. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was one thing that the Myron Baldock had mentioned. I just thought so much of what he said. Like, I thought it really stuck with me. He speaks about how he was deemed the champion of lost causes, which I loved. But he spoke about, like, how people who are drug dealers, they still have rights. You know, it's not a case that this guy was a kingpin and he doesn't have the right to, you know, justice. Like, he does. But I don't know, it's hard because Cal, in a way, he's likable, but he's also not.
And we get that from Steve Fishman, where he talks at times about how he wasn't sure he liked him.
Yeah, I appreciated that, because they obviously have to, like, build up a relationship and a rapport for getting into the case. But I just felt, I don't know that I felt the atonement, like a genuine atonement from what he's saying. And I feel like Sam Fishman had kind of said that as well. Like, Steve. You know, he says he's... Steve Fishman says that, like, he mentions, you know, oh, he says he's angry, but I don't hear anger, or he says he's sorry, but I don't hear like regret. Um, it just, I don't know. It's hard. It's a tricky one.
I think I'm also looking at this through the lens of, like, we hear that he did not. So Cal didn't grow up in poverty. He grew up in a sort
Hmm.
of lower middle class, decent neighborhood, and which is interesting because I think if the thing I might compare some of this to, and it gets name checked here, is The Wire, where
Mm,
you've got these boys and young men who don't really have a lot of options
no.
for what they can go into, and we don't know really, but I mean, it seems like Cal wanted money. He wanted to be able to buy nice things, and this was the path that was in front of him. I don't know what his other choices were. I don't know what else he could have done, but there certainly was a time, and this is that time, the 90s, in places like New York, where for a lot of people this was their way to make some money.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious to hear where that goes and what more we get from him. All right, I guess we've kind of alluded to this, but how eager would you say you are to keep listening?
Yeah. Would recommend. Let's do it. It feels like a crime that's worth its time.
Well, I'm also very eager to keep listening.
Don't forget, we are on Patreon, patreon.com/so much crime, so little time. You'll get early release episodes, some bonus content, great outtakes. You wouldn't believe what happens on the outtakes. Like they're just great fun altogether. And you'll also support us in making this show. But while you're at it, don't forget to rate us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell your friends, your frenemies, your moms, your dads, your dogs, if they have their own devices. But don't go yet. We've got a true crime question of the week. Woo!
All right, Dee, our true crime question of the week.
So one part of the story that we didn't talk about that we hear of in episode 1 is the two brothers who were murdered. As they were leaving a food place, they made a comment towards some of the drug dealers. He referred to them as kid or something. And it seems to be the setup here is that why they were murdered, or one of the reasons they were murdered, was because of this offensive comment that or the disrespect they showed to the drug dealers. So adding some comedy to horrendous crimes, we're going to bring you to a true crime question of the week, which is, was there a time you slagged someone and it backfired badly?
So my story actually comes from when I was in college. And one of the things I did in college, because I was trying to think about like things that I kind of regret saying or doing that went poorly for me. And one of the things I did in college was I had a weekly column in the college newspaper where I guess you would describe it as my main point was to sort of piss people off. Like I was sort of just trying to incite things and be sort of I don't know. It meant something to me at the time. But one of the things that I did was I was constantly sort of shitting on the school's football team and it's student athletes in general, the people who took their sports too seriously, because our football team was a D3, which is basically these are people who are not going to have football as their careers. I'm going to do it again now.
You haven't learned your lesson, Jeff.
My point is, every week I was trying to be more and more incendiary in the newspaper, and turns out not a great way to be popular, because a lot of people read that article. And I remember, so several people, my wife included, have told me that, oh, they just had this perception of me as that asshole who writes those mean things in the paper. And when we went to a college reunion, or I think it was our 15-year reunion, that's the only one we went to, I don't know, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I joined this game of Flip Cup, and there's this woman there who, real drunk, and so this is 15 years after graduating from college, and she was my partner in the game, and she just kind of went on and on about how much she hated me for so long, and how 15 years later I was okay.
Why did she hate you?
Because of some of the things I said about people and groups that she cared about in college. So yeah, I pissed off a lot of groups. That's my story.
And it's in print, like you can never move away from it. And now you've said it again, so you've showed them that even though it's 50 years ago since you were in college, you still have not learned your lesson.
Well, I would like to say here on the mic, first of all, I went to the college paper's website, and it turns out they have not digitized those articles, so that's great. And second, but maybe this should have been first, I am sorry for saying those things. And I don't think they were warranted. I think I was just an idiotic, 19-year-old or whatever I was. And yeah, wasn't really thinking it through.
That's fair.
After the loss of his lawyer, what comes next for Cal Buari?
Will he get out of prison? And what happens to him if he does?
We'll recap all of Empire on Blood.
That's on the next So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of MimeGov Media. The executive producer is Paxton Calariso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show in your podcast app. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.